Hey there and welcome to Matt's Garage and another PT Cruiser repair video. Today we're going to be doing a complete brake job on my mom's 2003 Dream Cruiser Turbo. So here are the parts we need essentially. We've got brake pads for both ends, and we've got a pin kit, caliper pin kit for each end, and we've got a full liter of DOT3 brake fluid because I'm going to be flushing out the brake fluid. So we'll get started. I'm also going to be deglazing, kind of resurfacing the rotors. One thing I'll mention, it's very important, this car takes DOT3 fluid. They have DOT4 and DOT5 fluid. You don't want to mix them. It's not like if you get 5 it's better than 3. You got to use what the car is designed for, because if you use the wrong ones it can actually harm the seals and stuff in the system. All that stuff is geared towards whatever is meant to be in the system, and in this case it's DOT3, so I just wanted to mention that is important. As well, you want to clean off the cap. It says right on there to clean the filler cap before removal. Okay guys, pretty basic here. I've got my turkey baster there, and then I have a dedicated bucket here, ice cream bucket for the brake fluid. And one very important thing, you don't want to spill any of that brake fluid, so get some shop towels and stuff around here so that if you're dribbling as you're going to your container, it's not getting on the paint because it can damage your paint. Also, try to have the container as close to the brake fluid reservoir as possible so you're not dripping out over the body. Like if you can put it on the strut tower here or something, that's perfect. Okay, and we'll get that cap off. Remember to clean your cap first, which I already did. And you can see it's definitely not supposed to look like that. Brake fluid's pretty much clear, and that stuff is, yeah, it's green, brown, whatever. It's probably the original, and that's the problem. This is a very overlooked thing, but it's important because brake fluid absorbs moisture, and moisture doesn't, it's not as effective in a hydraulic braking system as brake fluid, obviously. So you don't want that in there. Your brake pedal will be spongy, and your fluid will boil easier, that kind of thing. So you want to get that swapped out. I always do this when I buy a used car. So you can see that. That's a little tricky to see. I ended up spilling a little, but it landed on my paper towels. So they don't actually hold very much. Now don't go pumping your brake pedal when you got this empty, because you'll suck air into the system. And if your car has ABS, which this one actually does, most PTs don't, but this one does, it'll go into the ABS pump and you'll have a heck of a job getting it bled back out of there. Okay, so we're going to call that good for now. And as I said, as we go around to each wheel and push it back, we're just going to come back here and suck a little more out. And then we'll probably add some fresh stuff and still crack at least the rear bleeders and, pump it through the long lines out the rear. I'd like to do all 4 actually. I'm just going to wipe off the threads here a little bit. Yeah, a little bit of gunge on there. And we'll just put the cap back on for now to keep any debris out of there. A little gunge around the cap there. So we'll get this contaminated towels out of here and just keep all this stuff separate. When you're done the job, get it all in one garbage bag. I'm working off of one piece of cardboard so that all my brake fluid's contained in one area. And then I'm not cross-contaminating, because literally having it on my gloves and touching the fender of the car or something, I could mess up the paint. So be careful with that. Here you can see what I mean by containing it all to one piece of cardboard, and then I'll throw that out when I'm done. This is what I use to bleed it out of the bleeders. Like that is, you leave some brake fluid in there. It's just a pop bottle. You can buy things for this, a one-man brake bleeder basically, and I'll show you how to use that. Basically, when you hook that to the bleeder and you go in there and pump the pedal, it won't suck air because it will suck back fluid, and it will push out more than it sucks back in, so you can effectively bleed out your system using something like this. And so that's what I'll be doing. Okay, so next on the agenda, we're just going to jack the car up, and I'm just going to do one end at a time. So I'll start on the front. This car is four-wheel disc brakes. Most PTs, or non-turbo PTs rather, have drum brakes in the rear. So I'll do another video on servicing PT Cruiser drum brakes at some point. But for today we're going to be working with just disc brakes. So whenever I have a car jacked up and the wheel off the ground like this, one thing I like to do is I like to come like this, rock the wheel in and out like that, and then come on the top and bottom and rock it as well. And you're just feeling to see if there's any play in anything in there. And of course, if there is, then you have to investigate further your tie rod ends, your wheel bearings, your control arm bushings, that kind of thing. But on this car, everything's nice and tight, so we can go ahead and proceed with removing the wheel to do our brake job. Okay, and we're not going to be using a jack stand. You should use a jack stand, I recommend one, but I'm not going to be using one, so I'm going to put the wheel and tire under the car. That way if the car fell, it would just land on the tire. Okay, so I'll show you guys a little better on the other side because it's real dark on this side of the car, but you can see how beautiful everything is. California fresh. Everything looks kind of like new, except the brake pads and the rotors themselves. The rotors aren't too bad, but they've got a little ridge on the edge for sure, and the backside looks even worse. Pad wise, you can see there's very little pad life left on the outside, and again the inside's even worse, so I'll show you when we get there. There's almost nothing left on the pad. Now the amazing part of this is this car passed an out of province safety inspection in British Columbia about a week before I got it, and I find that amazing that someone would pass these brakes. These brakes are definitely due for replacement. Even though there's a little bit of material left on that pad, you really don't want to run that last bit, because what will happen is the material will heat up and it will start to delaminate from the backing plate, and it can crack and bind up in there and all sorts of bad stuff. So just don't run them to the end. Don't run them to the metal. Replace them when they get about like this, or even before, and then you will have no worries and no problems. So I'm gonna just get to this, and I'll probably throw these pads in, do the rotor, everything, and then I'll show you a more detailed look when we get to the other side. I'll be replacing these pins as well. So, and you can see that the turbos have turbo specific brakes on them, so make sure you specify that your car is a turbo when you're ordering brakes. The front brakes on a turbo are slightly larger than on a non-turbo, and the back brakes, as I said, they're disc brakes. On a regular PT, they'd be standard drum brakes. Okay guys, I just wanted to show you this tool in action. This is what I'm going to use to compress the piston back into the caliper, and that'll actually push brake fluid up into the reservoir. So I'm going to set the camera up at the reservoir, and then I'm going to be down here cranking this tight. You just use one of the old brake pads in there to push on the piston evenly. And then this, as you can see, has its own plate there to push against. Pretty handy little tool, but you can also use just a big C-clamp or a pair of giant channel locks works. So there you go, you can see the reservoir is about a third full. Again, I don't know if you were able to see that fluid rushing back in there or not, but we're going to do both the front ones, and then it should be about half full, so we can come back with our turkey baster and just suck it out again. Okay guys, I'm off in the dark corner of the shop, but we're just going to quickly kind of deglaze this rotor and take the ridges off of it. We're not really resurfacing it per se, it's more like a deglazing. You could measure minimum thickness, that wouldn't be a bad idea. I'm not personally going to bother. It looks like a newer rotor, it's just got a little bit of wear on it. And you know, I could get away with just doing a pad slap. It's really not in that bad a shape, but I just prefer to just do this quick deglazing process, which I actually made a complete video on, and I'll link that up in the description. So go check that out if you're interested, and I'll just give you a really quick demo here. If you are doing this, you should wear hand, eye, and ear protection. I'm wearing ear protection and hand protection and lacking the eye protection, so do as I say and not as I do. Okay guys, you can see I've got the backside cleaned up now too, and it's covered in metal dust, of course, and you don't want to just blow it off because it's also covered in brake dust. And in fact, this is a good step to do before you even start, but it didn't have a lot of brake dust on it, so I didn't bother. But just take some brake clean, this is literally what it's for, and hose it down. And I'll flip it all over and do all sides of it. So just do that before you install it so that there's no contaminants left on it that are gonna get into the new pads and contaminate them and prevent them from performing to their optimal. Okay guys, this is your caliper mounting bracket, and right there are, see, there are little wear points for the caliper to slide on. And so you want to clean all those up, they're kind of greasy. And then they have brake part lubricant, like brake grease or whatever they call it. And it's loaded with silicone, so I never use it in my shop because I try to avoid using silicone products. They can affect paint jobs, and I do some painting in my shop here. So I just use grease. I find it seems to work better anyways. So we're going to clean up both of those. There's one on each side. And then we're going to remove the pins here and change them. You can see I've got new pins here. Okay, it's looking like I only have one set of new pins. I could have sworn that they came in pairs, but apparently they don't. You have to order one for each caliper. So I guess we're going to be replacing one pin and cleaning one pin. So we'll pull them both out and check for wear, and we'll replace the more worn one. That's basically what happens, is they can get like a low spot worn in them or something, and then your caliper can stick on that point. So that's why I like to change them out, and if nothing else, at least clean and grease this. So you can see they go into there, and those are all full of grimy grease, and it's a dead end hole, so we're going to have to try and flush that out with some Varsol here and stuff, and just get those sliding nice again. Okay, we'll let that soak in there for a second, and then we'll just curl up a piece of shop towel and work around in there. And then these, ideally we'd have new rubbers, everything, but these parts are in good shape. There's actually no need to change them if I just clean them up. Really not too worn, so I guess I'll just pick one at random, and that's the one that's getting replaced. And we'll do the same on the other side. I think we'll put the new one in the top because the top takes more pressure when you're going ahead and you stop. It's the top that holds the caliper back. Still full of Varsol in there. Okay, and now I'm just going to, I'll blow that out with an air gun off camera here. I blew that out off camera, so we'll just wipe in there again a little. These will clean out a little. So we'll just clean up these sliders here. Should wear gloves to do this. I had a pair on earlier and I was just sweating too much, so gloveless it is. So we're just going to grease the pin and then we'll put the boot on it. You don't need a crazy amount of grease, especially here in Alberta in the cold weather. This grease will get pretty stiff in here, so go easy on it. Just slide that up there. Goes on very nicely, just like so. And like so. Okay, now we're gonna assemble that, but what I'm gonna do is show you on that side when I go to assemble it. I'll show you the full disassembly and assembly on the driver's side. I'm just showing you this is the right hand caliper bracket. Okay guys, I just wanted to go over a few things on this side before I get to the other. I got this all together. One thing, these rotors, the way I did them by hand like this, there will be a bit of a break-in period. There may be a little roughness in the pedal for the first week or so until those new pads seat into the resurfaced rotor. These pads are premium pads, and they actually came with new sliders there, so I pulled those old ones out that I had cleaned and greased and put the new ones in, and they're all greased up. You can see I put that one new pin on top. The bottom one's old, but everything went together really slick. These pads also have a squealer on them. That's what that is. See, when the pad gets worn down past the point, that'll contact the rotor and basically squeal. So I would never wear a pad to the point it hit the squealer, not intentionally, but that's what they're for. They're for people who don't notice their brake pads are wearing out, and if they hear that, they'll take it in for service. So that normally goes on the inside pad when you have that. I just wanted to show you guys, because not many PTs actually have ABS, but this is your ABS sensor if you do have it. That's the sensor, and that's the pickup ring there. And if you're having an ABS light, the first thing you should try doing is cleaning this up. Sometimes they'll get like mud or stuff like that clogged in between these little pickup points here, and then the sensor faults out, it misreads. So just try cleaning that up in there really good with some brake clean and, I don't know, a wire brush or a screwdriver if it's really mudded up. Don't get rough with the sensor, but the ring is metal, so just get the ring nice and clean, I guess, and you can take the sensor off. It's just 110 millimeter, and sometimes it's like kind of like a magnet, and there'll be some stuff like stuck to it, so just wipe it off with a shop towel or whatever, and you know, a lot of times that's all it is, and you'll get your ABS light to go out again. Okay guys, here we are over on the driver's side of the car now. I've got a lot of bright lights over here so I can really show you what's going on. I already jacked up the car using the rear control arm mount bolt. I jack right under the head of that. And again, I'm not going to put jack stands because I'm not crawling under the car, so I'm just going to put the wheel off the car, under the car. And so yeah, we'll get started. We'll get this wheel pulled off here. One thing with these tin covered nuts here, everybody disses on them, but they're not too bad. The trick with them, you always got to make sure they're fully seated in your socket. If they're only part way in the socket, what will happen is it will twist the cover on the nut. It will make a little crinkle right in the corner of it, and you won't be able to get your socket all the way on. Or if you do, it'll jam on there. So just be careful with those, and they will actually last pretty good for you. Just gentle with your wheel because it can contact the caliper there and scrape up your chrome. So, okay guys, I got the wheel out of the way, so we're just going to take the caliper off. It's actually 12 millimeter on this car. I don't think that's factory. I think they're either 10 or 13 from the factory. Just using this as a hammer. There we go, and we are just going to put that there. I'm actually going to zip tie it to the strut just to be safe. And this is just while I compress the piston, and I'll zip tie it way up here on the spring. You don't want these things falling or dangling from the brake hose at all. So you just take one of your old pads, see how thin those are? Take one of those and stick in there. And then your tool, gotta have it just like that. And now, as I said, the fluid will be going into the reservoir. I'm pushing the piston back, so I'm displacing fluid up into the reservoir. And since I put the new pads in the other side, it's not going to push the piston back because the new pads took up that space. So we'll end up with a bunch of fluid up in the reservoir. We can suck that out. I'll just show you that piston going back. You don't want to like force it back. I didn't go all the way as far as I could have on the other side. You're better off to leave it out a bit, and then if you need to move it back a bit more to fit the new pads, fine. But you could blow the seals or something if you depress it too far in. So we'll snip that zip tie off our strut, and then I've got another zip tie here, and what you want to do is watch your brake hose as you're doing this, and just try and find a place where your brake hose is relaxed, and then you can zip tie this right up to the spring on your strut. So there we go, the brake hose is back there and it's relaxed, it's not kinked over, so that's perfect. Now we got to take the caliper bracket off to get the rotor off. So it's two 18mm bolts that come in from the back side. If you got a nice 18mm short socket like that, it works best. And there we go. So we know that we've got new sliders here. So we'll pull those off. And then we'll do the same thing. We'll clean up our pins again. I already showed that process on camera, so I'm not going to this time. And then I'll catch up with you again when we assemble it back on here. I'm also going to go over this rotor and deglaze it like I did the other one. Well, we're going back together, guys. Okay, and I'm just going to go grab the caliper bracket, but first I like to put a little 3-in-1 oil on my bolts. Mix and go in real easy. Don't need a lot, just a drip on the threads. Okay, you can see I've got the pins all cleaned, greased, and installed again. So we just got to put these sliders in and grease them up. And with those, you kind of start down here, and you slide them in like that. Just start below, and slide up in, and that's how you can start it easy. Okay, now we're just going to put ever so little bit of grease on there, and that is ready to go in. I'm just going to wipe my fingers. You don't want to get grease on the rotor if you can avoid it. Here. You may have to just move that around a little bit until the holes line up. Helps to keep your rotor on there square while you're doing this up. Otherwise it will fight you. Okay, so we'll snug that down real good. I'll put a caption for the torque spec on these 18mm fasteners back here. I just basically a real good push on this 1/2-inch ratchet does it for me. So now we got to get our caliper back down, so just cut that zip tie. And we're actually going to grease just around the piston here and right here where the pads ride. Just a nice skim on there. I guess we got to get the pads in place too. They just slide in. Okay, so remember the one with the squealer goes at the back. And of course they go with the springs out. Okay, just slide that puppy in there. Just look at the crazy difference between the old and the new pad. So now while you're putting the caliper on, you kind of got to hold the rotor back. What I like to do, get in here with my knee and just pin it back. And then I can use both hands to install the rotor and hold install the caliper, I mean, and hold the pads. Just make sure your line's not twisted, that you've got this the right way up. If it's the right way up, this bleeder valve will always be on the top. That never goes on the bottom, it has to be at the top to release the air. So I normally get the piston on there first and then slide it over on the front. This one went on real easy. And then these pins here, they have to have the flat spots have to be lined up with the caliper. They kind of sit there to keep this from turning, because don't forget you're tightening it, so if it turned it would just spin. And then you have to push these back sometimes, like the bottom one right now. Have to push it back, and there my caliper can slide back into place now. So it's just those springs that keep pushing it back out, so we just got to get the pin bolts started here. Okay, now we'll just use my 12mm ratcheting wrench. And those ones stay probably around 30 foot-pounds torque. I don't know, I'll put a torque spec up. I just give them a good snug pull with that wrench. So we're pretty well done here. There's just one last step that you want to do. Let's take some brake clean and clean this off in case you got any greasy fingerprints on it or anything, so that the new pads don't get grease on them and then they're not going to work very good. So that's essentially what brake clean's for. I know people use it for just about everything, but it is literally for this. So now we move on to the back brakes, but first we're going to actually go up and take a look at that reservoir and see if we can suction a little more out with our turkey baster. And then I'm actually going to bleed the front brakes a little here just to push some new fluid through. So after we suck that out, we'll top it up with some fresh fluid. So we'll get up there and do that now. Okay, so here we are at the reservoir, and let's just see what's going on in there. Just like I predicted, it's about halfway full. Nice brown fluid, so we'll get that sucked out of there. Don't think I need to show you that again. Pretty basic. And then we're going to be moving on to the rear brakes. Okay guys, I went and swabbed that out with a shop towel a little bit. Got it looking a little better in there. And now we're just going to pour some new brake fluid in and we'll start our flush. I'm trying to do this without a funnel. Maybe I better plan on spilling a little if I'm going to do that. Direct hit. You want to pour it in slowly. You don't want it like chugging and making bubbles in there. Bubbles are bad in a brake system. And don't overfill it, even though we're going to be pushing some out right away here. You don't want to overfill it because sometimes it can come up in the reservoir a little bit here. I think I'm just going to leave the cap off while I'm doing the flush just to make sure it can suck down fast enough. Okay guys, you can see I've got my bleeder bottle ready to go there, and I'm just going to hook it up to the bleeder valve, which is right there. And it's 7/16 or 11mm. There's a little cap over it. So there's what the bleeder looks like. You can see it's got a bit of a lip on it. So basically what we want to do is take our washer fluid hose that we got here and force it over that. And you can see that's going to hold on there just nicely. And now we can actually open up the bleeder, and the system will be, this will be part of the system. And then we can go inside the car and pump the brakes. There we go. Wasn't seized or anything because the car's from California. And one thing you want to keep an eye on, your fluid level in the bottle so you don't overflow it, and also up in the reservoir, because if you run the reservoir dry, it will suck air into the braking system and then you'll have a whole lot of bleeding to do. So I'm going to set you guys up here so you can see how the bleeder bottle's working. You'll see the fluid going up and down in it and such. And I'll just be in the car pumping the brakes slow and steady. You don't want to pump them faster. You can, you know, suck air in or blow fluid out the reservoir cap, whatever. So just be a little careful with that. Just gentle does it. Okay guys, you could see the bubbles in there. You could see the fluid level come up. I just did about 6 or 7 pumps on that. Now what you want to do is lock down the bleeder before you disconnect this line. Remember, this line makes this part of the brake system, and then when you seal up the bleeder, it's no longer. So then you can remove the hose without fear. Don't overdo it on these bleeders. Just snug them up good, but don't overdo it. There we go. That's good for that one. So we are literally done with that caliper. We're actually going to go and do the one on the other side, which I'll have to crawl under the front now because I've got the wheel on already. but you can totally do it with the wheels on. Don't forget to put the dust cap back on. Unfortunately, mine kinda fell apart when I took it off, so I might look into new ones. A lot of older cars are missing, but it's nice to put them on if you have them to keep water out of that. So I'm not going to show you guys the process on the other side. I already showed you here, and it's pretty basic. It's just the same thing on every wheel. And then you come up here and check your reservoir and just keep topping it up as you go. Every wheel you're going to have to top it up. You can see it's under half again. So I'm going to just bring it up, and yeah, you cycle all your old dirty fluid out that way. See, the back ones are actually not really grooved up at all. In fact, the back pads have more wear on them too. So I'm just going to do a pad swap on the back. Pad slap, as they call it. So we're just getting started on the back brakes here. So I'm just going to jack it up, and there's a jack point right under here. There's actually a little arrow. There's like a plate that hangs down. It's got a little arrow. Put your jack right where that arrow is. It's like a cutout arrow. You'll see what I mean. Okay, so we'll just get the wheel off here. 19 millimeter. Except for that one. Somebody's put a 21 there. The rest are, no, that one and that one are 21. These are 19. But normally PTs are 19. Unless somebody's put aftermarket lug nuts on. You can see these rotors are quite nice. There's no ridge around there. The pads aren't even that bad. They're only about half wore, but I just want to do everything while I'm in here. And these are 10 millimeter on these mounting bolts, so I think that's what the front one should be. Just use that 10 on a ratchet to get at that. There's plenty of access room. Okay, and the pads stay with the caliper. They'll come right off with the caliper. You gotta pull out the top and then lift up because it hooks on the bottom here. And you can just work it off. The brake hose is not terribly long, so make sure you have a zip tie ready. I'm just gonna zip tie it up through the muffler hanger here. There we go. It's hanging there nicely. Okay guys, we're just gonna remove the pads. So there's just like a spring here that you have to pull up and then pull the pad out at the same time. It's not too bad. It's just 4 AM, so I'm making it look hard. There we go. And then get your tool in there and you can go right on that old pad there and compress the piston. Again, be careful not to compress it too far. I think that's about good. Now this pad, it has tabs that stick into the center of the piston. So you just pop it out, just work it out of the piston like that. Okay, so next we're going to change out the pins. So we'll just get these old ones pulled out first, and then I got to get all the grease cleaned out. The little boot here just hooks into a groove in the pin, so you got to work it out of that groove in each end. Just like that, and we'll clean and grease that pin up. So we'll just compare our new pin to our old pin and make sure they're the same, and they are. We're going to clean out those two just kind of with a wet shop towel, wet it with Varsol. A little Varsol on there. Then I just like to take my pinky, and you can't really wear gloves for this, so and I just wipe in there the best I can. These ones don't look too bad. The fronts were a lot worse. Wipe that old pin off. Just make sure the new pin's clean. And then we're going to grease them both and install them here. So just my little tube of grease there that I rip off as I go. And just finger dip. Like I said, you don't need to go crazy with grease on these. If you put too much, it can get stiff in the cold and cause more trouble than good. So just like that, just a good coating on there so they slide. Don't forget they're sealed in these pins. So okay, so we're going to put the new one on top here. Latched in on that end. Just make sure that that's sealed in the groove, and then the other end just push the rubber back until it seals in the groove. Yeah, I think that's actually got it. So there we go, both pins are back in, all cleaned and greased and sliding freely. So now while we're at it, we'll grease up the caliper here in preparation for our new brake pads. And actually there's little, I don't know if you guys can see that, but there's little wear marks there. Normally what I like to do is kind of grind that down so that it's all smooth and true again. These aren't terrible though, and it's 4 a.m. so I can't start a grinder right now. So we'll just put a little bit of grease on there as well. I'm really impressed with these Monroe brake pads actually. These are different thickness of shims basically that you go on the tips of the pads. So that if you do like grind that down, they tell you that you can do that, but then of course you have a bit more play here, so when you go from forward to reverse you tend to get a bit of a clunk. So that would be the front one. See, that's what they're talking about there. So we'll see if we can maybe get rid of that. See, that one's not too bad, but that one's pretty bad. Well, I figured there ought to be a little movement in there, so I did put a shim on the bottom end here. It's just a 15 thou shim, and so there's a little place just so it won't stick. Same thing on the back side, I didn't even shim that one, it's perfect. Okay, so we'll just get these pads set up in the caliper. On the back here you have to have them in the caliper because they clip in. So that one just got to give it a firm pull and it will pop in. I'm just going to squeeze those tabs a little with pliers there, a little spread. Squeeze them together, and just squeezing them together a little with the pliers. And now there won't be so much spring tension when I go to put that in. There we go. We got it seated now. And then this one clips in, of course, so gotta spread those way up. There's one. There's two. And this one, yeah, I think it acts as a spring, just like that, yeah. So now we can cut that zip tie and literally put it on. Now remember, it hooks in on the bottom first, so you gotta have the bottom, gotta shove it right in and down. What's fighting me here? Oh, the pin, you gotta have the pin pushed that way. One pin, two pins. Now we just have to put our bolts back in. You might have to just jiggle it around a bit to line up those bolts as they go in. And that's all there is to it. I'll include a torque spec as a caption if I can find one. Otherwise, just a good firm pull like that on a wrench is good. Okay guys, well we're all hooked up. The caliper's installed again. And new pads are in, so we're just going to take the cap off the rear bleeder here. Work that over there. Just like so. And then 7/16, which I find odd. Well, maybe it's 11. 11 is the metric equivalent of 7/16. It's a little loose on there, so I think that's the case. Anyways, I'll use my flare wrench. That'll get it better. There we go. Not too bad. You do want to be careful because you can twist these off sometimes if they're really stuck. So I guess be cautious how hard you force them. If it feels like it's going to twist off, it might very well. So there we go. We've loosened it off about 1.5 turns. So we'll go in and pump the brakes. I think we're going to go about 20 pumps actually at least on the back because we got to clear out all those lines. I did 10 on one side on the front and about 15 on the other. Basically, the farther away from the reservoir you are, the longer the lines are going to be, so the more you have to pump to fully flush out the lines. Just make sure you don't pump too hard and blow the hose off, because that can make a real mess and it will let air into your system, and then you'll have a lot more bleeding to do. So this is basically the same method you'd use if you were changing a caliper or something and you had to bleed the air out of the system. This is how you do it. You can use the bottle just like this, the one-man bleeder. The other method is where you have two people. You have one person that loosens this as you push the pedal down, then tightens it as you hold the pedal on the floor, then you let the pedal up with it tight, then you loosen it, push it down, so on and so forth. And that way, when you do the backstroke, it can't suck air in because the person here is tightening it. In this case, it can't suck air in because it's sucking liquid in from the bottle. And you'll notice it blows bubbles when it pushes fluid into the bottle. Okay guys, I did about 25 pumps, and that was enough to empty the reservoir. So I'd say we're sufficiently flushed. So we can tighten up our bleeder and take our line off. And now you just want to quickly hit that with some brake clean, just to get rid of any of that brake fluid. You don't want that stuff dripping out on your floor and stuff. And we put that little dust cap back on, and we're all done on this wheel. Now again, don't forget to brake clean off your rotor when you're done installing your pads and everything, just in case you got greasy fingerprints on there. Kind of hard to get at the back side there on this one with that dust shield there, but I think we're good here. One thing I want to warn you guys about disc brakes in particular, like when you go and compress your caliper, your piston back there to put your new pads in, and then later when you go and get back in the car to drive, there's going to be, your pedal's going to go to the floor pretty well. You're going to have to give it a couple pumps to get your brakes back. So just don't neglect that step, because I have heard stories of people crashing cars right after doing a brake job and whatnot because they forgot to do that. So don't be that person. Okay guys, well I'm pretty much done here. I still gotta do the other back corner and flush that caliper out, but it's going to be the same thing as this, so I'm not going to bother recording it. The only thing I didn't cover in this video is the parking brake in there. So in another video, a separate video at some point, I will get in there and service that and show you what that's all about. For now, I hope you found this video helpful and informative. Thanks a lot for watching Matt's Garage. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and have yourself a great day.